Well, hey, so we are in Matthew chapter 11 this morning, Matthew chapter 11. But what I want to say is before we get going, so once you find Matthew chapter 11, put your finger in there, okay? And then go and find Isaiah chapter 61 and Malachi 3. I know. So you guys use your bulletins, okay? There's this cool trick. You can put it in there. So you can hold the spot, okay? But Isaiah 61 and Malachi chapter 3. When I first started this passage, it became very, as you'll see, it becomes very obvious that Jesus, it's almost like, have you ever gotten inside an inside conversation and you can't really figure out what they're talking about, but they're talking about something important? And you don't know the inside information? Well, this is going to get us the inside information to understand this. So Isaiah 61 and Malachi chapter 3. You guys there, roughly? I think so. Sure, that's confident. Okay. I find one of the most depressing Sundays in the entire year is the Sunday that follows the Super Bowl. Because football is done. Good. It's just done. And so there's no more college football. That ended here about a month ago. And now there's no other football. But now we get to talk about other things, such as the draft. That's right. And we get to ask some pretty hard questions as football teams. And football teams are faced with this every single year, where they start looking at their roster and their personnel, and they look at their quarterback or their three quarterbacks, like the Broncos tried to run, and they look at them and they have to ask some very hard questions. They say, "Are you who we hoped you were? Are you the future of our franchise? Can you even fit into our budget?" And they have to examine, they're like, "Are you the one? Are you the one we are going to rest and base our entire organization on?" And the Seattle Seahawks did that with Russell Wilson here a few years ago, and they're like, "You're it." And they coughed up $45 bajillion and said, "Make magic happen." And then you have this year. There was a lacking of magic. The Broncos, they pretty much have no idea what they're doing, and they have picked three quarterbacks. Because what better way to win a football game than with three quarterbacks? And no line, and I don't know. It's been a sad time. But you have to ask them, are you our next player? Are you the guy we're hoping you are? Because if not, we got to get rid of you, or figure out how to get rid of you, or trade you, or drop you, or something. Maybe encourage you to retire because you're just too old. Whatever it is, there is a question that sits there. Are you the one? Are you the future of our team? John the Baptist, the forerunner of Jesus, he was the bold speaker that we talked about here months ago. He wore camel skins, he ate locusts, and he had been paving the way for the ministry of Jesus. And then he was arrested. And he started catching wind of the teachings of Jesus, and not only the teachings, but he also caught wind of some of the miracles that had been done. And he's wondering how, if I'm supposed to be paving the way for Jesus and paving the way for what's coming, why am I in jail? It's very hard to pave the way for somebody if I'm stuck in jail. Maybe this Jesus isn't who I think he was. Maybe this Jesus isn't the right guy. Maybe there's another Messiah, and maybe it was just an honest mistake. And he's struggling. I mean, he's been in prison. And prison, it wasn't like it is now. I mean, you might not even get fed there. You're actually dependent upon other people to come feed you. So you just sit there, alone, trying to figure out, is this Jesus really who says it? Did I waste my time? Did I waste my effort? Am I in jail for no reason at all? So he has this question. Are you the one we've been waiting on? And so he sends his messengers. He can't get out of prison. And so his messengers have been visiting his disciples. John's disciples have been visiting him and letting him know, hey, Jesus is doing this and this. And it's really cool, but Jesus is saying some crazy things too, and we don't understand them, and we don't know what to do. And so John's like, I need you guys to go talk to Jesus. And I need you to ask him, are you the one who is to come? Are you that person we've been waiting on? Are you him? Or should we look for another? And that's the question that sits upon the text here this morning. And what we're going to find out is what we're going to see is how Jesus answers this question. So we're in Matthew chapter 11 here this morning, okay? So Matthew chapter 11. We're just going to break it through, like our first point is in verses 1 through 6. Our second point is in 7 through 15. And then we will end a few verses after that, all right? And so Matthew chapter 11, verse 1 through 6. He says, when Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in their cities. Now, when John heard in prison about the deeds of Christ, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another? And Jesus answered them, go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, and the lame walk. Lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have good news preached to them. And blessed is the one who is not offended by me. And so this is how Jesus responds to him. Are you the one? And Jesus responds, blessed is the one not offended by me. And that's our first point. Blessed is the one not offended by me. See, Jesus had just finished instructing his 12 disciples. So in essence, and then he went on from there to teach and preach in their cities. Now remember, we've been studying this for the last few weeks. Jesus gets his disciples and he pairs them up and he equips and sends them out and gives them power. And he is very honest and very bold about the challenges that they would have, and so he sends them off. And now this portion of time, it's one of these things you can just gloss over and not even get. Jesus is by himself here. So Jesus keeps doing what he's doing, but his disciples have been sent off to teach and preach the good news of the kingdom, and so there you go. And so he went on from there to teach and preach in their cities. And John the Baptist heard, okay, and so he sends word, are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another? We're going to get into this here in a chunk of weeks, but in Matthew chapter 14, so that's here in a few chapters, verse 3, this gives us a little background of how this played out, all right? And we're going to study this a little bit more when we come up, but it's one of these we should make mention of. Matthew chapter 14, verse 3 says, Herod had seized John and bound him and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. And we'll talk about the connection there, but a leader, they called him kings, but in essence, it was a more powerful governor. So we think in terms of states here in the United States of America. So you have the president, he's the big dog, okay? And that is the leader. So that would be very similar to the Caesar of Rome, all right? Now, yes, there are differences. We don't have a dictator. Theirs was, etc. Okay, so we get there's differences, but they broke their area up into state-like things, and here they would have kings or governors depending on how the structure was set up. And a lot of times the Roman Empire was totally fine with letting previous leaders rule those areas as long as they swore allegiance, but the most important thing, as long as they continued to pay taxes. Herod was one of those good individuals. He had no problem paying money to Rome to stay in power. Well, all this political intrigue and everything else, eventually his brother Philip's wife didn't like John the Baptist, and John the Baptist had This is what he said. He says, it is not lawful for you to have her. And so this whole thing, Herod was with another one who was here and this and brought together. And John the Baptist is like, hey, it's not legal, dude. Well, what do you do when that happens? You hush them up, go hide, and they just arrested him, put him in prison. And so as though he wanted to put him to death. He feared the people because they held him to be a prophet. And so the last thing Herod wanted to do was make a lot of people angry. So it's better to put him in a prison, have people forget about them, and then kill him later, than it was to have this giant display, bold, etc., head chopping thing. Everyone's like, what? You just killed a prophet. So Herod goes and he puts him and shoves him in a corner and says, people will hopefully forget about you. So this is what happened with John. His ministry had run into the political powers that be, and as a result of that, John got put into prison. And so John's been sitting here for a while. And so he asks Jesus, are you him? And in verse 4, Jesus answered them and he says, we're back in Matthew chapter 11. He says, go and tell John what you hear and see. And then he gives them a list. He says, the blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf heal, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have good news preached to them. And what's fun about this is, so in Luke chapter 4, verse 16 through 21, I'll read it to you, but you guys can actually go back to Isaiah chapter 61. All right, so this is where you save your spot, okay? And this is where we're going to fill this in. So go to Isaiah chapter 61. Make sure I got it. Okay, so verse 1, all right? And so this is where we're going to create some significance here by what Jesus is saying, all right? And so Jesus has just said, pay attention to, these are the miracles that I've done. Okay, this is what I've done. And so he lists off the miracles, okay? But then he says this other line at the end of it, which actually captures a lot of meaning. All right, so you guys are at Isaiah 61, verse 1, right? Okay, so here is Luke chapter 4, verse 16 through 21, all right? And you guys will see how this matches. Just go with it, okay? So Jesus comes to Nazareth, where he'd been brought up, and as was his custom, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and he stood up to read. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written. And he says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. I just lost my place. The Spirit of the Lord was upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. So you guys see what Jesus read? He read Isaiah chapter 61. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. What is significant about this set of verses is it is proclaiming the coming Messiah that is going to do this. So here now, okay, so keep Isaiah 61 in the back of your minds. We're going to come back to it, all right? So go back to Matthew 11 now. Remember I said the whole inside, we're trying to get the inside conversation here. So he tells John's disciples, the blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have good news preached to them. He's literally telling John's disciples, I am who Isaiah chapter 61 is talking about. And then he leaves this with John's disciples, blessed are those who are not offended by me. So blessed are those who, in essence, hang in there. John, I am who you think I am. Hang in there just a little bit longer. It's a very powerful reminder to John as the disciples would go back and recite this. And like I said, John was very knowledgeable in Scripture. And so Jesus has just confirmed to him, I am the Messiah. I am who you think I am. bring a lot of encouragement. So that question, are you the one we're hoping? Or are you that guy? Jesus is like, yeah, I am the guy. I am him. I am worth following. Hang in there and follow me. You guys tracking so far? Good, hope? Okay, all right. Let's keep going here. Verse 7, all right, Matthew 11. It says, as they went away, Jesus began to speak to the crowds concerning John. And so this incident that happened, see, Jesus is teaching this crowd. John's disciples come up and say, hey, are you that guy? And he goes and he responds to them and answers them. But people, being nosy, like to listen, they're going to sit there and going to hear this the whole thing. And they're like, okay, but then what's the point of John? He's in prison. These are questions they would have. Yeah, blessed is he. When we get in, John's the forerunner. So what purpose does John serve in the plan of Jesus? Because that's sort of a lame way to go. Here you're the forerunner and you're in jail. Sort of a lame way to go. So what point does John do, okay? And so Jesus began to speak to the crowds concerning John, and he says, what did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind? Have you guys ever just gone out into a field and just stared at grass? Not lately. What do you? Of course, grass moves in the wind. Is that really why you left your town to go? Oh man, Nikki and I, you know what we're doing for a date this next time? We're going to go out into a field and stare at grass. Sounds romantic, yeah. No, okay? That is silly. And so this is what Jesus said. You go out into a field to watch the grass blow? No? Okay. Let's keep going here. Well, then what did you go out to see? A man dressed in soft clothing. Behold, those who wear soft clothing are in king's houses. Have you ever seen them? You know those like engagement pictures or whatever, where it's like the bride and her or wedding pictures in her dress or whatever, and the guy, he's all dressed up and they go out into the field and they try to get pictures and their shoes are all muddy and everything else. Do you go out into a field to watch people who are dressed up in nice, fancy, rich clothes? Do you go out and see that? Well, maybe. I mean, it could be really funny if he falls, I guess, in the mud or something, but not really. You don't go out into the wilderness to look and watch rich people. If you want to find rich people, you go into the castle. You go downtown. You go to the government. Why would you do that, okay? And so he's setting this up here. What purpose did you guys have for going out into the wilderness? Why? What then did you see? And he tells them, he says, you went out there to see a prophet. You believed that John the Baptist, my forerunner, was a prophet. This is he of whom it is written, behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you. And that is in reference to Malachi chapter 3, verse 1. Okay, so if you want to go back and look at that, we'll get there here in a second. It says, truly I say to you, among those born of women, there has arisen no one greater than John the Baptist, yet the one who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and the violent take it by force, for all the prophets and the law prophesied until John. And if you are willing to accept it, he is Elijah, who is to come. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And so this entire second point is summarized by that last line in verse 15. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So what he's saying is he who is willing to hear, let him hear. He who is willing to stop for a minute, slow down, and consider what I'm saying, listen. Okay? So this is what he says. So he now attaches to John the Baptist. He's like, yes, John the Baptist is a prophet. And then he quotes, this is who, Malachi chapter 3, verse 1, behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you. passage. I'm right here. See, Malachi chapter 3, verse 1 says this. Behold, I send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me. And the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come as to his temple. And the messenger of the covenant in whom you delight, behold, he is coming, says the Lord of hosts. But if you guys look in Malachi 3, verse 2, it's this phrase, but who can endure the day of his coming, and who can stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire and like a fuller's soap. So Jesus quotes this passage and directly says John the Baptist is this guy. And that's very bold, because if John the Baptist is the guy that Malachi chapter 3, verse 1 and 2 was talking about, that means that Jesus is the one who Malachi chapter 3, 1 and 2 is also about. But this is where things get a little confusing for us. Because they're looking at Jesus, and they're like, who can endure the day of his coming, and who can stand when he appears? Who is he, like a refiner's fire and a fuller's soap? Okay, these are implications of judgment and wrath, and and this is the idea that Jesus is coming back, and he is going to wrong, or he's going to right all the wrongs, and he's going to put everything back, and he's going to throw off the bad people, aka Rome, and get rid of them and free Israel. And they're looking at Jesus and they're like, we haven't seen that yet. We've seen a bunch of talk about loving others and all this healing, nice stuff. Where's the fire? We're not seeing it here. See, and this is, so there's that. Okay, now go back to Isaiah chapter 6. Okay, and we're going to build on this. This is where Jesus is all. So this is, and we'll be in Isaiah, we're in Isaiah 61. Seth, where's Matthias? I'm going to need your help here in a second. You and Seth. So come up here. Come. Just sit right there. You too, Seth. Yeah, come on. Just come while we're talking, okay? And sit right there. Okay. Where am I? Isaiah. Okay, so Isaiah 61, 1 and 2, it says, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. That sounds really happy, right? Okay, did you catch that when I read in the Luke passage that Jesus stopped right before a phrase? And the day of vengeance of our God. I'm hoping you guys are trying with me, because I don't know how else to explain this. So when Jesus read this Isaiah passage, he read it and stopped right there and said, today this is fulfilled. You notice how he didn't say, and the day of vengeance of our God is fulfilled? This is what was so hard for many Jewish people to understand. When they were waiting on the Messiah, they were waiting on the one who was going to bring vengeance. The one who was going to bring punishment and judgment and wrath. And this is why the Pharisees had such a hard time. Because here's Jesus, and he's talking about love, and he's talking about being patient with one another, and he's talking about kindness, and he's hanging out with sinners and with evil people. And the Pharisees are like, where's the judgment? Where is it? Jesus is supposed to come and be all happy and hayah to people. We're not seeing the hayah. Clyde will fill in for him. But where is that part? And this is what is so hard for so many people. Even John is waiting like, wait a second, I'm in prison. Why am I in prison? Why, Jesus, why haven't you freed the captives? Why haven't you gone out and done your thing? Where's the judgment? Where's the vengeance? So this is what happened. Okay, come here, guys. You guys are hills for me, okay? Yeah, so, Devin, I need you too. Okay, so let's go over this way, okay? So, you are a hill.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, good. That was good. You are a hill. Okay. And Devin, I think you need to come right here. Get on your knees. You are a valley. Okay. All right. So, okay, I need you to do YMCA. Okay, do Y. Okay, no, just do Y. No, not you. Just do Y. Okay. So from my perspective, okay, I'm looking now. Nothing is perfectly clear when it comes to this, futuristic talent stuff. So I'm looking here. Okay, maybe it's a little fuzzy. Okay, and I'm looking, and so from my perspective, it looks like Seth has 2 arms growing out of his neck. Okay, do you guys see how I could see that? Okay, so when I'm looking here, I see Seth has 2 arms. 4 arms, okay? That's what I see, all right? And so often when it comes to biblical prophecy, whoever the prophet was will say this grand thing. And we're looking like, oh, that's going to be pretty sweet. And so we're looking, and we're like, okay. And so then Jesus shows up. And here's Jesus. Man, this cross thing, you did, close your legs. This is perfect, man. You just rocked right into this, okay? And so here's Jesus. And Jesus' first coming offers the cross. All right? And so we're looking, we're like, yeah, I see that. But then we're like, where's the vengeance? Where's the why? Where's the rest of this? And so from a Jewish person, we're like, okay, you guys can put your arms down. You guys are doing great. But do you guys see how you get that messed up? If I'm staring through here and it's not perfectly clear, I can look and I would combine this with this. Completely by accident. And there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, it would not look weird if Seth had 2 arms growing out of his neck. And so, but there's so much of the prophecy, Jesus Christ and the prophets, they group the day of the Lord into one giant event. The cross, judgment. You guys, man, okay. You guys track here? The problem that we don't, from there, could I see Devin? There's this giant block, and this is actually where the church sits. And the Gentiles, there's this valley. The Jews they could have no comprehension of this. Man, you guys are like getting into this. This is great. You can't do any better. And so here's what's going on. Thank you. You guys can take a seat. Give them a round of applause. You guys rocked, okay? Thank you, guys. So that's what happens. And so Jesus is trying to explain this, okay? And he says, I need you guys to have ears to hear. I want you to slow down. She's like, I want you to really understand what I'm saying. Jesus isn't saying the judgment isn't happening. What Jesus is saying is it can't happen right now. Because if judgment happened without the cross, could you imagine that? If the cross wasn't here and God judged, we would all be destroyed. There would be no hope. We think, humanly speaking, they'll bring it to them because we're like, man, I'm right. I'm good. I got my life all figured out. Nothing's wrong with me. I'm a good person. I'm going to go to heaven. There's nothing wrong. And God's like, no. Actually, if God came and judged, he would have to judge everyone because we're all guilty before him. And that's why it's so important that there's a cross here in the way. It gives people hope and a chance for salvation. And so here he's telling John, okay, so he's teaching his people this, all right? So back in Matthew 11, okay? He says, I say to you, there has, among these born of women, there has arisen no one greater than John the Baptist, yet the one who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. And so he's actually saying John the Baptist is so important because John the Baptist introduces the coming and the entire climactic event of the cross and judgment all in one giant thing. John the Baptist gets this thing started. It's huge. It's so big. But he tells them, he says, oh, John the Baptist day coming. He says, the kingdom of heaven for all the prophets. It's like a sort of a parenthesis. Make sure I'm getting all the prophets, all the prophets. Okay, so it says verse 13. All right, he is talking about the kingdom of heaven has always been under attack. And he's actually implying it's also been attacked by the nation of Israel, God's chosen people as well. If you guys ever read the Old Testament, what you'll find is many prophets of God that God sent are actually killed by his own people. The kingdom of heaven, God's people, God's plan has always been under attack, even by his own people. Ugh. He says all the prophets, this is what he's talking about the Old Testament. So he says the entire Old Testament, okay, has prophesied until John, if you are willing to accept it. So he's begging them, I want you guys to listen. John the Baptist, that forerunner, he is where the entire Old Testament has been pointing to. Because John the Baptist introduces the kingdom and the plan of God. He introduces Jesus. He's the guy who starts it. He's the one, and he pay attention. This is how big John the Baptist is. And so once again, he answers that question. Are you who we hope you are? And Jesus is like, yes. Because John the Baptist introduces the coming of Jesus Christ and the plan of him. It's happening. This is it. But I hope you guys can really understand, because a lot of times we look back at the nation of Israel and the people of God, and we're like, I would never have messed that up. In my great wisdom when it comes to the Bible, I understand everything all the time. No. A lot of stuff we don't know. There's a lot of stuff we still don't get. And so we can look, and if we're looking at it that way, we're like, you know what? Because sometimes I'm a little slow. I'm pretty dense sometimes. I'm a doofus. And so I could see how the nation of Israel will get that confused. It would actually make a lot of sense. In God's mind, he's like, yeah, this in the whole shebang is one awesome day for me. And we're like, that's actually like 2,000 times 365, 4 million, no, 336, whatever. And us, we're thinking days and days and days. And God's like, this is one plan for me. And he wants them to stop and listen. He says, if you're willing to accept it, he is the Elijah. This is the messenger of God that paves the way for the Messiah. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And what a reminder. He doesn't rebuke. He doesn't chide. He doesn't punish and get on to these people who are trying to figure this out. You notice that? Does he get on to John's disciples for doubting him? For not having faith? Oh, John, you should have known better. No. Jesus is like, don't worry, man. Just hang in there. I am he. Then he tells his other people, I want you to really slow down and listen. Pay attention. Examine these claims. See, John questioned and struggled with this question. Are you the Messiah? Is Jesus the one? And those are very legit questions to ask. And if you're asking those questions today, keep asking them. Study it, ponder. Jesus used John and who John was to teach others about himself. And he wanted his disciples and his followers to pay attention to this and listen carefully. And so what we've seen so far is searching the claims of Jesus is challenging, as you guys have seen. And what we'll see here in a second is that it has eternal ramifications. This isn't something to do lightly. All right? So look at Matthew chapter 11, verse 16 through 22-ish, okay? Ish is, you'll see why. He says, but to what shall I compare this generation? And so now there's going to be a little more judgment that's going to play out. And well, Leslie is going to build on this a little bit more here next week, but I want to summarize it. And he says, what shall I compare this generation? Is it like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to their playmates? We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look at him, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But then he says a little further in verse 20, but then he began to denounce the cities where most of his mighty works had been done because they did not repent. And he says, woe to you, Verse 22, I tell you, it'll be more bearable on that day of judgment for Tyre and Sidon than for you. Punishment is coming because you guys rejected the Messiah. And so he starts talking about punishment, and he sets this up like this. So when catchy music is played, what are usual responses of human beings? Right? Something about it, okay? Something like, all right, we get in, okay? And so we get on it. Now, I came from backgrounds in Christianity where Baptists don't dance. Okay? Don't. And if you do, you're giving into your flesh, and therefore you're an evil person. I say this, and I've seen it firsthand. So my youth group did other things with other youth groups. And one of these other youth groups, if they were tapping on the pew, because when the youth songs would end, their youth leaders would come up and literally rebuke them right there. And so I came up from a background where you didn't dance, you didn't lift your hands, you gripped that pew in front of you if you were at all being moved by the Spirit to maybe move your body a little bit. And so I have a confession. I came here almost 4.5 years ago, and there was Awana. And as you guys know Jim Henry, and he gets a little bit into it sometimes with his music, okay? And so there's nothing wrong with that. And so he's getting into it, trying to lead these kids singing, get you moving, and here I am. I'm like, am I allowed to do this? Am I not? And so him and Tom repeatedly, hey, pastor, move, get your hands up, do something. I don't know what to do because that's the frame. And so, and I'm sitting here like, oh my goodness. And so here's Jesus like, when the music gets going, what are you guys doing? When the funeral procession is going on, what are you doing? You're doing nothing. Nothing's happening. You guys are literally going the opposite of what you're supposed to do. And Jesus is like, guys, the music is playing. Things are happening. It's going. And instead of following and joining with the Messiah and the plan that's coming, you guys actually said, Jesus is a demon. He's a glutton and a drunkard. This is Jesus who has been healing people left and right and promising peace and hope and love, and he's coming, and you guys are like, we don't believe it. And what happens is Jesus says, you, at the end of verse 23, you will be brought down to Hades. It says, for if the mighty works done in you had been done in Sodom and Gomorrah. We know that hellfire and brimstone, that passage. And he says, if I had showed up to Sodom and Gomorrah and was healing people left and right, the city of Sodom and Gomorrah would have repented. Think about that. That evil, evil city would have repented. And here you guys are, and I'm right here in front of you, and you're failing. And so when it comes to the claims of Jesus, and when we're examining, are you who we say you are? Are we who you think and hope you are? These are very worthwhile questions to ask. And so today, if you are pondering and thinking, is Jesus real? Is he really the Messiah? Keep studying it. Because what Jesus is saying is hey, my claims and what I'm saying actually has eternal ramifications. Don't be the one when the music starts playing and it's happy and it's popping. Don't be the one. Don't be like Pastor Jacob who had his hands in his pocket. Don't be like them who don't want to sing. Don't respond and move. And so study the claims of Jesus. And for those who we have examined and we do believe that Jesus is who he says he is, let me encourage you this week, study it and learn about Jesus even more. And so if you're not spending time in the Word of God, take a few minutes. Just add a few minutes every single day